I just wanted to get home. The piercing glare of oncoming headlights roused me from my road trip daze. I blinked hard and gripped the steering wheel, zeroing in on the faded green mile marker. Just my luck, 2:30 a.m. and still over 3 hours from home. I fucking hated night drives with a passion. Time for a break. The next exit advertised a Texaco station, which meant a chance to stretch my legs and down some muddy caffeine. I pulled off the rural 2-lane highway and coasted down the off-ramp, my eyes adjusting to the sudden dark. An antiquated Phillips 66 appeared first, lights off and pumps bagged. By the time I rolled past, the Texaco sign peeked through a line of drooping willows, revealing a rectangular building and a small parking lot. 2 other cars sat parked, but something about the place felt off. Maybe it was the way those trees loomed over the property, their branches like bony fingers scratching at the night sky, or how the tall lampposts threw more shadows than light across the lot's damaged pavement. I shivered. Get a grip, Jane. It's just a rest stop. Cruising past the empty pumps, I parked and killed the engine. The silence hit instantly, as suffocating as the heat. My car clock flashed 2:47 a.m. I glanced around. Where was the trucker banter and bullshit? The buzz of neon signs? Something wasn't right. I stepped out anyway, the damp night air stinging my nostrils. The smell of mud and mold mingled with the scent of gasoline wafting from the pumps. Crickets sawed away in the dark brush beyond the lot. I headed for the main building, scanning the vacant picnic tables and dumpsters along the way. The door creaked open to reveal a stale interior smelling of industrial cleaner. Rows of snacks and drinks faded into the dim corners sans illumination. It was cold and still. Something really wasn't right. I crossed my arms, hugging myself as I peered down the narrow aisles. Why were all the lights off? "Hello?" I called out. "Anyone here?" No answer except the echo of my own voice. I hovered near the front, the shadows behind the register growing animate, shape-shifting with each glance. What kind of truck stop closed up at this hour? I considered getting back on the road. Better not to stick around, but something pinned me in place. Maybe it was my tired brain playing tricks. I started envisioning the postcard I'd write to my sister back home. "Wish you were here," it'd say, fronted by a kitschy snapshot of this dump. On the back I'd scrawl, "Middle of nowhere, TX, more ghost than town." The thought made me smile, despite the unease festering inside. With a calming breath, I wandered toward the back in search of a bathroom. I found one tucked in the rear corner, the door plastered with organization stickers and event notices from years past. Inside smelled the worst kind of sour, the mirror pocked and stained brown with "I hate to think what" at the edges. I sat down, making sure my skin didn't come into contact with anything, and quickly finished my business. "Time to get out of this shithole, Jane." I clenched my fists and headed back to the car, keys at the ready as a makeshift weapon. But I stopped short outside the restroom. Were those voices? I crept forward, hugging the wall, snippets of conversation drifting from the side of the building. Laughter, too, guttural and choking. I froze, skin prickling. Someone was back there. That was good, right? Almost normal. But it didn't feel good. It didn't feel normal. I shook the thought away and straightened up. "You're being paranoid, Jane. Just take a peek." I edged along the front wall toward the voices, keeping flush with the brick. Their strange guttural cadence grew louder, closer. At the corner, I stilled my breath and chanced to look around. Just a weed-strewn parking area and dumpsters, no people. But the voices remained, echoing as if carried on the wind. I stepped into the open, turning in a slow circle. "Hello?" The voices went silent. I hugged myself again, dizzy with adrenaline. Shit. Fuck. Get to the car. Now. I spun on my heel and came face to face with a willowy silhouette. A startled cry burst from my lips. A sound I don't think I'd ever made before. The figure stood mere feet away along the edge of the woods, half obscured by the curtain of willow branches. My heart ricocheted against my ribs as we stared at one another. Then it began to move, pushing through the cascade of leaves. One long arm extended, the branch-like fingers splayed wide. Not real. Can't be. I tripped backward with a scream, the blood roaring in my ears. Spinning around, I broke into a frantic sprint toward my car. Heavy footsteps pounded the dirt behind me, closing in fast. No, no, not tonight, not for you, Jane. Go now. I cleared the dumpsters in 3 bounds, my vehicle now in sight. Just a few more feet. With a guttural grunt, thick arms seized me and swung me back like a rag doll. The ground rushed up to meet me, all the air left from my body on impact. Dazed, I rolled to my back and looked into the void. A hairless creature loomed over me, its slender limbs crooked at painful angles. Rows of jagged fangs glinted behind leathery lips, curled into a snarl. A nightmare creature. I opened my mouth to scream, but managed only a whimper. Scrambling up, I fled for my car once more. Almost there. My fingers grazed the handle just as a blow struck my shoulder blades. I sprawled onto the pavement, my keys skittering away into the dark. Wheezing, I glanced back again. Not one, but at least 3 of the nightmarish, grotesque, towering, humanoid things now stalked towards me. Their eyes smoldered like hot coals in cadaverous faces. This isn't fucking happening. This can't be fucking real! I crawled desperately after my keys, sobs of panic bubbling up in my chest. The creatures hissed, nearly upon me. Then my fingers closed on cool metal beneath a car, a tire iron. Clenching the steel bar, I staggered to my feet and spun to face my attackers. I tried to turn my fear into blazing anger. The beast at the head of the pack grunted, baring rows of serrated teeth. It charged straight for me, arms outstretched and grasping. With a primal scream, I reared back and swung with all my might. The iron bar bashed its head with a sickening crack. Dark blood spurted as the thing toppled sideways. Before the others could react, I clutched my new weapon and sprinted for the building. A window. The bathroom window. It was my only chance. I leapt up, clawing the frame with one hand while still clenching the tire iron with the other. The creatures raced after me, snarls rising into shrieks as every pounding footsteps shook the ground below. Just as gnarled fingers grazed my shoes, I crashed through the tiny window in a rain of glass. I tumbled inside, colliding with the sink in a burst of pain. Agony exploded along my ribs, but I stumbled forward anyway, fueled by adrenaline. Stall door! My trembling hands rattled the latch as the creature slammed against the outer bathroom wall. Snarls and hisses poured through the window above. I ducked inside the stall, the tire iron still clutched in one fist, and slammed the door just as the first creature burst through the window in a shower of glass and wood. It all happened so fast I felt whiplash setting in. Huddled on the toilet, I listened to the things ransack the room, grunting and growling. The stall walls shuddered as clawed hands rammed the thin metal divider. It was only a matter of time before they were upon me. I stared down at my makeshift weapon, gripping the cool steel until my knuckles blanched. You sure are fucked now, aren't you, Jane? Glass exploded around me as I crashed through the bathroom window. My palms shredded on the jagged sill, but I hardly felt the pain. Pure adrenaline coursed through my veins as I tumbled outside into the damp night air. Staggering to my feet, I broke into a limping run. Got to get to the woods. Got to find a place to hide. Got to survive. Behind me, the unholy creature's shrieks rose to a fever pitch, the bathroom door splintering beneath their assault. Any second now, they'd be upon me. I raced for the tree line, weaving between abandoned cars and picnic tables, my ankle screaming in protest. Just a little farther. The parking lot ended abruptly in a ditch, the only thing separating me from the dark forest. I half slid, half fell down the sandy bank, biting back a cry as my ankle buckled. Fuck! Scrambling up the other side on all fours, I plunged into the first line of trees, just as the creatures spilled from the building behind me. Their caterwaul echoed through the lot, sending prickles down my spine. I glanced back once. Big fucking mistake. 4 of the gangly, sinewy creatures bounded straight for the woods, burning red shimmering in the night. I turned and hobbled faster into the thicket of trees. Thorny branches clawed at my clothes and arms, thin trickles of blood mixing with cold sweat. The thickening forest swallowed up the parking lot light, submerging me in shadow. I glanced up at the night sky for guidance, relying on the stars to lead me north. But instead of the Big Dipper, an unfamiliar red constellation glowed ominously overhead. Ice water trickled down my spine. Where was I? What were those things? This has to be a nightmare. Please let me fucking wake up. An earth-shaking crash sounded nearby. The creatures were in the woods. I abandoned all hope of direction and focused only on weaving between the ancient trunks as quickly as possible. Zigzag, Jane. Make it hard for them. I stumbled over gnarled roots and sharp rocks, my ragged breathing and footfalls far too loud in the heavy silence. Ahead, the trees briefly thinned, moonlight illuminating a dirt road cutting through the forest. I slowed, squinting into the pale light. No sign of the creatures on the road ahead. Maybe I could follow it to safety. I crept from the tree line, ankle pulsing. The road's packed dirt showed no tire tracks, only a scattering of weeds poking up from cracks. Unease tickled my spine, but the road slashed straight through the woods. I had to take my chances. Limping out from the shadows, I hurried along the left side, ready to dive back into the trees. The road wove deeper into unfamiliar terrain, the landscape growing craggier. No lights ahead, no sounds but my own ragged breaths. Minutes passed without any sign of pursuit. The creatures must have lost my trail. I dragged my sleeve across my sweat-slicked forehead, dizzy with adrenaline. Just ahead, the road bent sharply right, disappearing around a spur of rock. I slowed, catching the trickle of running water. A stream lay just beyond the rock wall. I crept toward it, desperate to rinse the blood and grime from my hands and face. Rounding the corner, I blinked down at a moonlit creek about 6 feet across, water babbling over scattered rocks. Kneeling on the bank, I splashed the bracing water over my skin, shockingly cold. As I cupped a handful to my lips, a snarl split the air behind me. Close, too close. I whirled around in time to see a gnarled hand slash toward my face. I threw myself backward just as jagged nails grazed my cheek. One of the creatures stood on the road above me, pale skin glowing in the moonlight. It bared its rows of teeth and jumped down toward the bank, long limbs bent at horrible angles, wearing a tattered cloak. The sight of it made me gag. Scrambling to my feet, I turned and raced along the creek, all pretense of stealth abandoned. The creature's footfalls pounded the dirt behind me, steadily closing in. I pushed harder, lungs burning. The creek veered left around an ivy-choked oak. I followed the bend, straight into a towering cliff face. A dead end. I spun around, fists balled. The creature stalked toward me, an alien mouth twisting into a gruesome approximation of a grin. In a series of jerky motions, it pulled a curved dagger from its tattered robes. Moonlight glinted off the etched steel blade. Weaponless, I back it against the rock wall, legs quaking. The thing playfully flipped the dagger from hand to hand as it approached, palely is reflecting my terror back at me. It halted just out of reach, head twitching. In a flash, it slashed at my abdomen. I lurched left, the blade barely slicing my shirt. It hissed, toying with me. It slashed at me twice more, grazing my arm on the last pass. Warm blood seeped down my wrist. As it drew back to strike again, I charged forward with a feral scream and swung at its face. My cross-punch connected with its sunken cheekbone. The thing recoiled, black blood spurting from its flattened nose. In that split second, I glimpsed my only chance. I leaped onto the creature, seizing its knife hand with both of mine. We crashed to the ground in a tangle of limbs, its fetid breath hot on my face. Grunting with effort, I smashed its hand again and again into a large rock protruding from the creek bed. With a sharp crack, its fingers went slack. I scrambled away with the dagger just as the creature grabbed my ankle with its good hand. Its pointed nails sank deep into my calf. Ignoring the pain, I kicked free and staggered to my feet. The thing was already up, broken hand dangling limply. It opened its maw and let loose an ear-splitting screech that echoed through the woods. Back up. Oh, fuck, and it was calling for backup. Clutching its silver dagger, I turned and plunged into the creek, wading against the current. Icy water gushed into my sneakers, but I forged ahead relentlessly, waiting for the sound of pursuit. It never came. The forest remained eerily silent except for the babble of the creek and my own splashing steps. Maybe the water had thrown off my scent. After 15 more minutes, I crawled from the frigid water into the shelter of the trees, numb and shivering. I leaned against a trunk, sinking down among the knotted roots as delayed panic set in. Heart beating so hard I thought it was going to crawl out of my throat. My mind became a blur. What actual fuck was happening to me? How could any of this be real? Had I fallen asleep at the wheel? Was I fucking dead? Biting my lip to stifle sobs, I tore a strip of fabric from my shirt to tightly bind the bleeding gash on my forearm. The pain barely registered through the adrenaline still coursing through my veins. Exhaustion seeped into my bones as my breath slowed to normal, but I couldn't rest for long. They were still out there, tracking me. But why? What did it have to do with me? Just the wrong place at the wrong time? Gripping the dagger, I pushed up from the roots on trembling legs. My clothes hung heavy, sodden with creek water. The cuts on my cheek and arm still oozed and stung. I staggered on through the forest, each step taking me farther from the road. My only plan was to get as deep into the trees as possible before the remaining creatures picked up my trail again. Because they would, eventually. I just wanted to get home. I crashed through the cottage door and slammed it shut behind me, my hands scrabbling to throw the rusty bolt. Heavy thuds shook the wooden door as the creatures threw themselves against it, howling my name. They knew my name. They knew my fucking name. Backing away, I scanned the murky room, looking for anything I could use as a weapon. Moonlight filtered through broken shutters, illuminating gaps in the floorboards and a stone fireplace choked with dead leaves. The stench of decay hung heavy in the air. This place looked abandoned, but the motherfuckers clearly knew I'd come here. It had to be a trap. The door splintered behind me as gnarled fists smashed through the wood. I raced toward the back of the cottage, desperate for an escape route. My foot broke through a rotted board and I stumbled into the next room just as the front door gave way. The mangled beasts poured inside, their shrieks deafening in the confined space. I scrambled to my feet and fled through an open back doorway. Outside lay a weed-choked graveyard dotted with crumbling headstones. I wove between the monuments, icy sweat slicking my skin. The heavy footfalls behind me slowed as I dodged around a towering marble angel. Circling the statue, I pressed my back against the cold stone and clamped my mouth shut, stifling panicked breaths. The creatures fanned out, hisses echoing around the graves as they searched. After endless moments, an earth-shaking crash came from the direction of the cottage, followed by guttural shouts. The creatures howled in rage, their voices receding as they rushed back inside. I sagged against the angel, dizzy with relief. But I couldn't stay hidden long. Gripping my stolen dagger, I crept from the cemetery into the woods beyond, muscles coiled to run. I had to keep moving and had to get off their trail. But my frantic flight through the alien forest had left me dizzy with exhaustion. I ached from countless cuts and bruises, my ankle and calf secreting blood. Maybe they could smell it? Maybe they were tracking the scent of my blood? Using things I'd learned from National Geographic didn't apply here. These things were beyond our understanding, beyond our logic, our reality. They were the stuff of nightmares, come to life. As the adrenaline seeped away, the reality of my situation sank in. I was injured, unarmed, lost in some nightmare version of a backwoods shit tip. Tears burned my eyes, but I swallowed them down. Don't you dare give up, Jane. Keep going. The woods grew denser, roots and briars tearing at my clothes. Ominous animal howls permeated the darkness. I pushed on, desperate to outpace the creatures. When I could go no farther, I slumped at the base of an ancient oak to rest. Eyelids weak, I glanced around the shadowy forest. No sign or sound of pursuit. Had I finally lost them, whatever the fuck they were? Just as exhaustion overwhelmed me, a twig snapped nearby. I jolted upright, heart in my throat. Scanning the underbrush, I locked eyes with one of the gangly creatures. I broke into a limping run, but two more emerged ahead to cut me off. They herded me left, directly toward a rocky outcropping. I scrambled up the stones and came face to face with the rest of the pack. 8 creatures stood before me. Yellow grins stretched wide beneath coal-red eyes. My knees went weak. I was well and truly trapped this time. This was it. This was how it ended. "What do you want from me?" I screamed hoarsely. Their leader, taller than the rest, pointed one clawed finger at my chest. "You are ours now." It rasped in a voice like tearing metal. It curled its finger, beckoning me forward. It spoke English? How? I backed against the rocks, clutching my pitiful dagger. The creature huffed in annoyance and stomped toward me. Before I could react, it seized my injured calf in one gnarled hand. Its claws sank deep into the wound and twisted sharply. White-hot agony exploded in my leg, and the world went black. I came around, sprawled on a damp stone floor, metallic scent cloying in my nose. My calf was on fire, blood soaking my jeans. Groaning, I took in the nightmare scene around me. I lay in a massive cavern, dark and sweltering. Crimson candle flames flickered in iron sconces, throwing dancing shadows over grisly bas-relief carvings on the walls. The imagery depicted creatures like my captors slaughtering humans from ancient civilizations in abhorrent ways, heads torn off, insides ripped out, heads and feet impaled on spikes. My gut twisted. I knew what this was. This was a sacrificial chamber. Shackled bodies hung from rusty chains, the living among the long dead. I craned my neck and glimpsed a towering altar at the chamber's heart, dark with crusted blood. Heavy footsteps signaled the creature's approach. I shut my eyes, feigning unconsciousness, as clawed hands seized me under the arms and dragged me across the sticky floor. They chained me upright against a blood-slicked wall, hot manacles biting my wrists. The pack gathered before me, blocking any hope of escape. I strained against the chains in futility. Their leader approached, a curved dagger glinting red in its malformed hand. It traced the tip lightly down my cheek and across my collarbone, leaving a burning trail. "We have collected many like you," it rasped, bearing rows of jagged fangs. "But few last long. They break too easily." Its boiling eyes roamed my body. "You are stronger. Your blood, your flesh, they will please our gods." Bile rose in my throat. I thrashed against the crushing chains, ignoring the pain. The creatures cackled, savoring my panic. This couldn't be the end. I hadn't survived this far by chance or luck alone. I just wanted to fucking go home. The leader gripped my arm to slice along my vein, but I wrenched away with adrenaline-fueled strength. Its claw caught in the cuff of my torn sleeve, slicing it open and revealing the small rock I'd concealed. In one smooth motion, I seized the rock and smashed it into the creature's eye. It recoiled with an air-rending shriek, black blood spurting down its face. In its torment, it slashed blindly outward. I ducked under the blade and drove my shoulder into the creature's torso. We toppled to the bloody ground in a thrashing heap, its dagger skidding away into darkness. Beneath me, the creature thrashed like a pinned insect. I locked my hands around its throat, gagging at the cold, slick skin. Squeezing with all my might, I held on as the thing's struggles weakened, then stilled. It was dead. "You're a fucking warrior, Jane." Gasping, I rolled off the lifeless body. The other creatures rushed forward, but I was already moving. I seized the leader's curved blade from the floor and hurled it at the nearest creature's chest. It sank deep, and the thing dropped, black blood bubbling from its mouth. I was weaponless again, but made a beeline toward the altar's shadowy base, praying its rough stone would provide handholds. If I could just climb up and topple it onto the motherfuckers. Clawed hands grasped at me as I scrambled up the blood-slick rock. Gritting my teeth, I climbed on, jagged edges cutting into my palms. Almost there. With the last of my waning strength, I clambered atop the wide altar, every muscle burning. The creatures surrounded it below, leaping upward and shrieking as they clawed for purchase. Battling vertigo, I slammed my shoulder against the front corner. The massive altar teetered, tipping forward agonizingly slowly. The creature's shrieks reached fever pitch. With a bone-shaking crash, the altar toppled onto them in an explosion of shattered stone. Twisted limbs poked from the rubble, the creature's death throes echoing through the chamber. I clung weakly to the rubble pile as the cavern trembled, cracks branching along the ceiling. This whole place was coming down. I crawled toward freedom, lungs choked with stone dust. But my legs finally gave out, refusing to carry me another inch. Collapsing amid the ruins, I stared up at the fracturing ceiling and let the tears fall freely. I had nothing left. The ceiling gave way above me and fell for what felt like forever. I just watched it. For fuck's sake, I just wanted to get home.